Calder Vane woke to silence and knew something was wrong. Not the silence of early morning, that thin hush before servants stirred and the palace groaned to life. This was different. This was absence. A hollow carved into the air where warmth should have been. He lay still for a moment, his hand stretched across the cold sheets beside him. Cold. Not cool the way they got when she rose early to walk the gardens before breakfast. Cold the way fabric got when no one had touched it in hours. He sat up slowly. The fire had burned to ash. Gray light pressed against the window glass, pale and unforgiving, and the room felt larger than it should have. Emptier. The kind of empty that vibrated, that hummed with the specific frequency of something missing. "Seren?" he called. Nothing answered. Not even an echo. The name fell flat against the stone walls and died. He waited, listening for the soft pad of her footsteps from the bathing room, for the quiet rustle of pages from the sitting alcove where she sometimes read when sleep refused to come, for the sound of her humming, that absent, tuneless hum she did when she thought no one was listening, which had somehow become the most familiar sound in his life, without him ever deciding it should be. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his bare feet meeting the stone floor, and crossed to her dressing room. The door was open. That was the first wrong thing. Seren always closed it. Always. A small boundary she maintained no matter what. Her one corner of the palace that was hers alone. He pushed it wider and stopped breathing. The wardrobe doors hung open. The shelves were bare. Every gown, every cloak, every soft linen nightdress she folded with such careful hands. Gone. The vanity had been stripped clean. No comb, no hairpins, no glass bottles of the rose water she dabbed behind her ears each morning. The surface was wiped down, polished even, as though she had wanted to leave the room better than she found it. Calder stood in the doorway, his mind struggling to assemble the evidence into something that made sense. People did not just vanish from the royal palace. Queens did not pack their belongings in the dead of night and disappear like ghosts. He turned and saw it. On the nightstand beside her pillow, placed with agonizing precision at the exact center of the polished wood, sat a ring. White gold, set with a pale blue stone the color of winter sky. The ring he had slid onto her finger 2 years ago while 500 people watched and the kingdom celebrated. She had left it behind. Not dropped, not forgotten. Placed. Deliberately, carefully, with the same quiet thoughtfulness she brought to everything she did. Calder picked it up. It was still cold. She had not worn it recently. How long had she been taking it off without him noticing? The question cracked something open inside his chest. Something he did not have a name for yet, but that would grow over the coming days into something enormous and devastating. Because Seren Vane, his queen, his wife, the woman he had assumed would always be there, had simply and completely left. And he had not seen it coming. Not even close. He tore through the palace in bare feet and sleeping clothes, the ring clenched in his fist so tightly the setting left a bruise. The guards at the eastern gate looked alarmed when their king appeared in the corridor wild-eyed and barefoot, his hair uncombed, his chest heaving like he had been running from something rather than toward it. "The Queen," Calder said, his voice harder than he intended. "Where is she?" They exchanged a glance. "We have not seen Her Majesty this morning, sire." "Last night? Did she pass through any gate last night?" Another glance. Longer this time. "No, Your Majesty, not through this gate." He sent Yose. He sent every guard on rotation. He sent riders to the outer walls and scouts to the roads leading north and south and east. He searched her sitting room, the library, the chapel, the garden paths she walked each morning along the southern wall. Nothing. No note. No message left with a servant. No explanation offered to a single soul. Just the ring on the nightstand. cold and final, and a room so empty it looked like she had never existed at all. Caldervane had conquered provinces. He had broken siege lines and shattered enemy formations, and bent the will of hostile alphas until they knelt. He had never once in his life been brought to his knees by absence, by the simple, devastating act of someone choosing to no longer be where he expected them to be. He stood in her empty dressing room, surrounded by bare shelves and the fading ghost of rosewater, and felt the ground shift beneath him in a way no battlefield ever had. Saren Holloway arrived at the palace of the Vane dynasty on a Tuesday, in rain so heavy the carriage wheels cut trenches into the gravel drive. She had been given 3 days' notice of her engagement and 4 weeks to prepare. He was taller than she expected, broader. The kind of build that suggested violence was never far from his hands, even when they held nothing more dangerous than a pen. His dark hair was pushed back from his face, and his jaw was set with the permanent tension of a man who carried too much and trusted too few. He glanced up when she entered. His gaze swept over her once, efficient and clinical, the way a general surveys a new supply line. He nodded. "Lady Holloway," he said, "welcome. Yossi will show you to your rooms." That was it. No warmth, no curiosity. Not cruelty either, just the blunt indifference of a man who had already mentally filed her under matters resolved and moved on. Seren smiled at him anyway. It was a good smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made the dimple in her left cheek appear. He did not see it. He had already looked back down at his documents. The wedding was 3 weeks later. Efficient, grand in the way the court demanded, and entirely impersonal. 500 guests and enough flowers to fill a greenhouse, all of it arranged by people she had never met for a ceremony that felt like it belonged to someone else. Calder spoke his vows with the same controlled precision he used for everything, his voice steady and clear and completely devoid of feeling. Seren spoke hers and meant every word, though her voice shook on the last line. He noticed. His eyes flickered to hers, and for one brief second something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, but awareness. A flicker of recognition that the woman standing in front of him might be more than a political arrangement. Then it was gone, and he turned to receive the court's applause. Their first night as husband and wife was silent and cold. He was polite, distant even, and afterward he lay on his back staring at the ceiling while she curled on her side and tried not to feel like a contract that had just been signed. "Are you all right?" he asked in the dark. His voice was stiff, uncertain. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." The silence that followed lasted until morning. Seren threw herself into the role with everything she had. She learned the names of every servant in the East Wing within the first week. She memorized the council's seating order, the trade agreements that funded the northern border, and which ministers despised each other so thoroughly they could not be seated within arm's reach. She charmed Councillor Aldrich, whose hostility toward the eastern provinces had been legendary for decades, by bringing him a specific tea blend from her homeland that eased his chronic headaches. He was eating out of her hand within a month. She reorganized the palace herb stores, which had been neglected since the last steward's retirement. She established a small reading circle among the younger court ladies that met twice a week and gave them something to do besides gossip. She wrote letters to every provincial governor's wife, introducing herself, asking about their families, building bridges that the crown had never thought to build through something as simple as warmth. She ate breakfast in the great hall every morning, dressed and composed, smiling at whoever sat near her, even when the seat beside her, his seat, remained empty. She waited for him in their chambers each evening, a book open on her lap, listening for his footsteps in the corridor. She left a candle burning on his nightstand so he would not have to find his way in the dark. Most nights, he did not come until she was already asleep. Some nights, he did not come at all. The candle would burn down to nothing, and she would wake to a puddle of cold wax and an undisturbed pillow beside her. She did not complain. She adjusted. She told herself he was busy, that the kingdom demanded his attention, that a king's duty came before a wife's loneliness. And all of that was true. But truth and comfort are not the same thing. Yossi found her one afternoon in the library, 3 months into the marriage. The beta was a quiet man with sharp eyes and the rare ability to say uncomfortable things without making them sound like accusations. "You stopped eating breakfast in the Great Hall," Yossi said. Seren looked up from her book. "I prefer the garden in the mornings now. The light is better." Yossi studied her. "The king asked why your chair was empty." Seren's heart leaped before she could stop it. He noticed? The look on Yossi's face told her everything. He had not noticed. Yossi had pointed it out. "Oh," she said quietly. "He is not a cruel man," Yossi offered carefully. "No," Seren agreed. "He is not. But there are worse things than cruelty," she thought. There is the slow, grinding loneliness of being invisible to someone you share a bed with. There is reaching across the sheets in the dark and finding nothing but cold linen. There is learning that your husband can look right through you like you are made of glass and never once wonder what is on the other side. She stopped wearing his crest on her collar 2 weeks later. He did not notice. She stopped attending the evening court gatherings a month after that. He did not notice. She stopped waiting up for him at night. She stopped listening for his footsteps. She stopped reaching across the bed. She stopped lighting the candle on his nightstand. She stopped leaving flowers on his desk, something she had done every Monday since the wedding without him ever once mentioning it. He did not notice any of it, not a single thing, and somewhere inside her chest, something that had been stretching thin for months finally began to tear. By midday, the palace was in controlled chaos. Yossi had established a command point in the war room, and riders had been dispatched along every major road within a day's ride of the capital. The household staff had been questioned. The gate logs had been reviewed. The stables confirmed one horse missing, a dappled mare Seren had favored for morning rides. Calder stood at the center of it all and felt utterly useless. He had fought border wars, negotiated with hostile alphas, crushed rebellions with tactical precision that still made military scholars write papers about his campaigns. And yet his own wife had walked out of his palace under his nose, past his guards, through his gates, and into the night, without a single person seeing her go. "She planned this," Yossi said, his voice carefully neutral. Calder's jaw tightened. "I can see that. For weeks, possibly longer, she moved her belongings out gradually, small things first, things no one would miss. By last night, all that remained were the pieces she wanted to leave behind." Calder said nothing. The weight of that sentence settled on his shoulders like iron. "What did she leave?" he asked. Yossi pulled a list from his coat. "Every piece of jewelry you gave her. The sapphire set from your anniversary, the pearl brooch from the northern summit, the emerald earrings from the solstice ball. Every item bearing the vain crest. Every gift, sire." Calder stared at him. "All of it?" "All of it. Cleaned, polished, and arranged in velvet cases in her wardrobe. And the ring, of course." The ring. Calder could still feel the cold circle of it in his palm. He had carried it from her nightstand and had not been able to put it down since. "What did she take?" Calder asked. "That is the interesting question," Yossi said. "Her personal clothing, practical items only. No gowns, no formal wear. Traveling clothes, boots, a heavy cloak, a satchel of dried herbs and medicines from the palace stores, her journal, and one other item." Yossi hesitated. "What item?" Calder pressed. "The miniature portrait her mother gave her before the wedding. The one of her family." The information landed like a blade between his ribs. She had stripped herself of every trace of her life as his queen and taken only the things that were hers before he ever existed. As though their marriage was a costume she had finally taken off and folded neatly on the shelf. She is not lost, Calder said slowly, the realization tasting bitter on his tongue. She is not confused or taken. She chose to leave. Yes, sire, Josie confirmed. The silence in the war room pressed in from all sides. Find her, Calder said. We are looking. But she had help. Whoever assisted her knew the guard rotations, the blind spots in the east corridor, and the one gate that relies on a single sentry between midnight and dawn. This was not impulsive. Someone helped her leave me, Calder thought. Someone she trusted more than her own husband. He turned to the window, staring out at the gray courtyard below. Servants crossed the flagstones, going about their duties as if the world had not shifted beneath his feet. There is another matter, Josie said behind him. Her handmaid, Tanith. Calder turned. Missing as well, Josie said. She did not report for duty this morning. Her room has been emptied in the same manner as the Queen's. So she had not gone alone. That was something. A small, cold comfort that tasted like failure. Bring me Brita, Calder said. Josie raised an eyebrow. The healer? Seren spent time in the healing rooms. She started going there 6 months ago. I want to know why. Even as the words left his mouth, the shame of them burned through him. He was asking a healer to tell him things about his wife that he should have known already. Things he would have known if he had ever once asked her how she spent her days. Josie left without comment, which was somehow worse than if he had said something. The beta's silence carried its own judgment. Calder looked down at the ring in his palm. The stone caught the thin light from the window and flashed once. Pale and cold. He closed his fist around it and squeezed until the setting bit into his skin. When Brita arrived, she was exactly what he expected. Older, composed, with steady hands and eyes that gave nothing away for free. She inclined her head but did not bow, and Calder remembered that healers in his kingdom answered to their oath before they answered to their king. Your Majesty sent for me, Brita said. The Queen, Calder began, then stopped. He did not know what question to ask. She visited you. She did. Why? Brita folded her hands in front of her. I cannot share the details of a patient's care without their consent, sire. The Queen gave no such consent. Calder's wolf surged against his skin, the first time all day it had stirred, and the growl that escaped his throat was low and involuntary. Brita did not flinch. Growling at me will not change the oath I swore, Your Majesty. He reined himself in, though it cost him. Is she in danger? Brita studied him for a long moment. That, she said carefully, depends entirely on you. What does that mean? But the healer shook her head. Ask yourself why she left, sire. When you have an honest answer to that question, come find me again, and I will tell you what I can. She turned and walked out. Calder stood alone in the war room, surrounded by maps and riders' reports, and the accumulated machinery of a kingdom that answered his every command. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do. That night, Calder could not sleep. He lay in the bed they had shared, her side undisturbed and perfectly made, and stared at the ceiling while the fire burned low. The sheets smelled faintly of rose water, and the scent carved a hole through his chest that no amount of reason could fill. He did not understand what was happening to him. He had slept alone for years before the marriage, campaigned in frozen trenches and blood-soaked fields, gone weeks without rest when the northern border demanded it. He did not need anyone beside him to sleep. But tonight, the emptiness on her side of the bed felt like a wound. His wolf was restless, pacing beneath his skin in agitated circles. It had been restless all day, a low hum of wrongness he could not quiet no matter how hard he tried. And beneath the agitation, deeper and more unsettling, was something he could only describe as hunger. Not for food, not for anything he could name. Just an aching, pulling need directed at the empty space where she used to be. He closed his eyes and saw her. Not the composed queen who sat silently at state dinners, who smiled politely at ambassadors, and never once raised her voice in public. He saw the other Seren, the one who existed only in small, unguarded moments he had barely registered at the time, but that now returned to him with punishing clarity. The night of the solstice ball, 6 months into their marriage. The great hall had been packed, music pouring from the gallery, and Calder had spent the evening discussing the grain tariff with 3 different ministers. At some point he had looked across the room and seen her standing near the window, alone. She was watching the dancers. Her face, unguarded because she thought no one was looking, held an expression that he had dismissed at the time as tiredness. He understood it now. It was loneliness. Bone-deep, resigned loneliness. The kind that has stopped hoping for rescue. He had turned back to the ministers without crossing the room. Another memory surfaced sharper. 7 months into the marriage. He had returned late from a council meeting and found her sitting in bed, a candle still burning, her journal open on her lap. She had looked up when he entered, and her whole face had changed. Lit up, softened, opened like a door. "I was hoping you would come," she said. He had pulled off his boots, dropped onto the bed, and said, "Long day." She had waited a moment, then another, the light in her face dimming by degrees. Then she closed her journal and blew out the candle. "Good night, Calder," she had whispered. He had fallen asleep within minutes. He had not asked about the journal. He had not asked why she was still awake. He had not reached for her, not kissed her forehead, not offered a single word beyond 2 syllables of complaint. That was the night she stopped waiting up for him. He knew that now. The memory was a blade, and he turned it over and over in his hands, cutting himself with the precision of it. There were others. A morning she had asked him to walk the gardens with her, and he had said perhaps tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. An evening she had placed her hand over his at dinner, and he had moved his hand to reach for his glass without acknowledging the contact. The way her smile had thinned over weeks and months, growing smaller and more careful, until it became something she wore rather than something she felt. He had watched it happen and registered nothing. Not because he was blind, but because he had never looked. He had treated her presence like furniture, like something permanent and reliable that required no maintenance, no attention, no care. And she had stayed. Month after month she had stayed, had kept showing up, had kept trying to reach him, until she stopped. And when she stopped, he had not noticed that either. Calder pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and breathed through the tightness in his chest. The wolf inside him whined, a thin, grieving sound he had never heard it make before. He sat up. The candle on his nightstand was burnt down to a stub. He stared at it and realized something he had never consciously processed. There was always a candle there. Every single night for the past year, a fresh candle on his side, lit and waiting. He had never asked who put it there. He had never once considered that she might have been the one lighting it. That she had been leaving a small flame burning every night, a quiet, stubborn beacon in the dark, as if to say, "I am still here. I am still waiting." The candle was gone now. She had taken it, or simply stopped replacing it. Either way, the message was the same. He threw back the covers and crossed to the window. The night sky was starless, pressing down on the castle like a hand. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. A knock at the door broke the silence. "Enter," he said. Yossi stepped inside, his face drawn and pale in the lamplight. "We have a report from the Eastern Road," the beta said. A woman matching the Queen's description was seen passing through the village of Ashenford at dusk yesterday. She was traveling with a companion and heading toward the Greymere border. Calder's pulse spiked. Greymere. Why would she go there? Josie hesitated, and that hesitation sent a chill through Calder's blood. The scouts who tracked her route found something at her last waypoint, Josie said. A site where she stopped to rest. And? Josie reached into his coat and withdrew a small glass vial, half empty, filled with a dark amber liquid that caught the candlelight. This was discarded near the campfire. I showed it to Brita. What is it? Calder demanded. A suppressant, Josie said quietly, specifically formulated to mask the symptoms of a severing bond. Brita says the Queen has been taking it for months. The words hit Calder like a physical blow. A severing bond? Your bond, sire. Yours and hers. It has been deteriorating. Brita believes it has been collapsing slowly for some time, and the Queen has been medicating herself to hide the effects. Calder couldn't speak. He stared at the vial in Yosa's hand, and the room seemed to tilt beneath him. What effects? He managed. Yosa's expression was careful, measured, the way it always was when he was about to deliver something that would cause damage. Pain, sire. Significant chronic pain. Migraines, joint aches. Fatigue so severe she could barely stand by the end of some days. He paused. Brita says the Queen bore it in silence for months. She came to the healing rooms only when it became too much to manage alone. The room went very still. She was in pain, Calder said, and the words came out hollow. Yes. For months. Yes, sire. And I did not know. Yossi said nothing. The silence was its own answer. Calder looked at the ring still clutched in his fist, at the cold blue stone that now seemed to pulse with accusation. His wife had been suffering. In his house. Under his roof. Beside him in this very bed. And she had hidden it because she knew, with the quiet certainty of a woman who had learned the lesson 100 times over, that he would not have noticed even if she had not. There is more, Josie said. Calder looked at him. Brita says a severing bond does not simply deteriorate on its own. It collapses when one half of the pair withdraws emotionally to the point where the connection begins to die. Josie met his king's eyes steadily. It is not a sickness, sire. It is a response. The bond is dying because it was never completed. The fire cracked in the grate. The cold pressed against the windows. Prepare my horse, Calder said. I am going after her myself. The road east from the capital wound through dense forest before opening into farmland, and Calder rode it hard through the night. Yossi rode beside him, silent and watchful. The way he always was when his king was making a decision, the beta was not entirely sure was wise. They reached Ashenford by dawn. It was a small village, the kind that existed at the intersection of two roads, and survived on the traffic between them. A handful of stone buildings, a farrier, an inn with a crooked chimney that leaked smoke into the gray morning air. The innkeeper recognized the Queen's description immediately. Quiet woman, dark hair, traveling with a handmaid? Yes, sire. They took a room for the night. Left before sunrise. How did she seem? Calder asked. The innkeeper hesitated, glancing between the king and his beta. Tired, sire. More than tired. She had trouble with the stairs. Her companion had to help her up the last few. Calder's chest tightened. He thanked the man and went upstairs to the room Seren had occupied. It had already been cleaned, the bed stripped and remade, the floor swept. But the window was still cracked open, and the faintest trace of rosewater clung to the air. He stood in the center of the small room and breathed it in, and something inside him cracked a little further. Yossi appeared in the doorway. I found Tanith's horse at the farrier. It threw a shoe on the road. They left on foot from here. On foot? Calder repeated. She could barely climb the stairs, and they left on foot. Jossie said nothing. They followed the trail east, Seren and Tanith had kept to the main road for a few miles before cutting north along a footpath that wound through birch forest toward the Greymere border. A shepherd had seen them. A woodcutter had offered them water. At every stop, the description was the same. The quiet woman looked unwell. She walked slowly. She rested often. At the second waypoint, a clearing where they had stopped to sleep, Calder found something that knocked the air from his lungs. Tanith had buried it beneath a cairn of stones near the fire pit, wrapped in oilcloth to keep it dry. A bundle of letters, sealed and addressed, each one bearing a name: Yossi, Brida, Counselor Aldrich, and one with no name at all, just a single pressed flower tucked beneath the wax seal. A white rose from the palace garden, the same variety that bloomed along the southern wall where Seren used to walk each morning. That letter was for him. Calder broke the seal with shaking hands and unfolded the page. Her handwriting was steady, precise, the penmanship of a woman who had been taught that neatness was a form of respect. But the words hit him like a siege engine. She did not blame him. That was the worst part. There was no anger in the letter, no accusation, no bitter catalogue of grievances. It was written with the calm, measured tenderness of someone who had already finished grieving and come out the other side into something worse: acceptance. She wrote that the bond between them had been fading for months, that her wolf, once strong and sure, had grown quieter with each passing week until she could barely feel it at all. She wrote that Brida had confirmed what she already suspected, that an incomplete mate bond, one where the connection was not mutual, would eventually consume itself. And when it did, the backlash would not simply hurt. It would kill, not just her. Both of them. She wrote that she had tried to hold it together, that she had taken the suppressants to mask the pain so he would not worry, though she did not say what she clearly meant, which was so he would not be inconvenienced. She wrote that she had made peace with leaving, that it was not punishment, that she did not want him to suffer. And then, the line that destroyed him. You were the best thing that almost happened to me. Calder read it 3 times. Each time it cut deeper. Not the best thing that happened, the best thing that almost happened. Almost. The word was a knife, and she had placed it with the same precision she placed the ring. He folded the letter and pressed it against his chest, his eyes burning. What does it say? Yosei asked quietly. She is dying, Calder said. The words tasted like ash. The bond is killing her, and she left so it would not kill me too. Yosei was quiet for a long moment. She left to save you. She left because she thought I would not care enough to follow. The beta did not argue, and that silence told Calder everything. She had been right to think it. A month ago, a week ago even, before the empty room and the cold ring and the letter that read like a eulogy, would he have followed? Would he have even noticed in time? He did not know the answer, and the uncertainty was worse than any wound he had ever taken. They found a third waypoint by late afternoon. This one was different. The campfire had burned out hours ago, but the ground beside it was disturbed, flattened in a way that suggested someone had collapsed rather than lain down. And in the trampled grass, a dark stain. Not blood. Worse. A thick, dark residue that Calder recognized with a jolt of visceral horror. Shed fur. Clumps of it, dark and fine, scattered in the grass like something being shed from the inside out. Her wolf, Calder whispered. Josie crouched beside the stain, his face grim. The bond deterioration is accelerating. She is losing her wolf sire, physically losing it. A shifter without a wolf was not a person who simply lost the ability to change form. It was a death. A slow, agonizing hollowing out that left the body intact, but gutted everything inside it that made a wolf what they were. Strength, senses, instinct. The ability to feel the bonds that connected pack to pack, mate to mate, soul to soul. Without her wolf, Siren would not just lose the bond, she would lose herself. How far ahead is she? Calder demanded. Half a day, maybe less. She is slowing down. Then we ride. He found her at dusk, in a healer's cottage on the wrong side of the Greymere border. The cottage sat in a clearing surrounded by ancient oaks, whose branches had grown together overhead, creating a canopy so dense the last of the evening light barely reached the ground. Smoke curled from the chimney. A horse was tied outside, and on the bench beside the door, wrapped in a gray cloak that made her look smaller than he remembered, sat Tanith. The handmaid saw him coming and stood. Her face cycled through surprise, alarm, and something that looked almost like relief before settling into the careful blankness of a woman who served a queen and understood where her loyalty needed to remain. Your Majesty, Tanith said. Where is she? Inside, with the healer. Tanith stepped between him and the door, which took a kind of courage Calder filed away to respect later. She does not want to see you, sire. I know, Calder said. She will not come back with you. I know that too. Tanith studied him, searching his face for something. Whatever she found, it made her jaw tighten. She has been in pain every single day for the past 5 months, Your Majesty. She hid it from everyone, bore it alone, and when it became unbearable, she chose to leave rather than burden you with it. Do you understand what kind of person does that? Yes, Calder said, and his voice cracked on the word. A person who has been taught that her pain does not matter. Tanith blinked. Whatever she had expected him to say, it was not that. The door opened. An older woman stepped out, lean and weathered, with sharp green eyes and silver hair pulled back from a face that had seen enough of the world to be unimpressed by kings. Healer Orven, Tanith said, this is the king. Orven looked him over the way Brita had, clinical and unsparing. So you are the one. Calder did not ask what she meant. He did not need to. She is resting, Orven said. The bond deterioration has progressed further than I hoped. Her wolf is failing. She came to me hoping I could sever the bond cleanly before it consumed what was left. Can you? Calder asked. Orven's expression shifted. A severing is not a cure, it is an amputation. You cut away the bond, and everything attached to it dies. Her wolf would not survive it. A wolfless shifter is a hollow thing, sire. Alive, yes, but barely. She would lose her senses, her strength, her ability to feel pack bonds. She would live out her years as half a person. Calder felt sick. And if the bond is not severed, then it will continue to deteriorate until it collapses on its own. The result is the same, except slower, and significantly more painful. There must be another option. Orven regarded him steadily. There is, but you are not going to like it. Tell me. The bond is dying because it was never completed, Orven said, echoing Brita's words with the bluntness of someone who had no patience for diplomatic softening. A mate bond requires both halves to sustain it. One side pouring everything into a connection while the other side ignores it is not a bond. It is a wound. And wounds that are not treated become fatal. To heal the bond, you would need to genuinely complete it, not perform it, not go through the motions, feel it, mean it, become the mate she needed you to be from the beginning. Orven paused, letting the weight of the words settle. And even then, it may be too late. The damage is extensive. There is no guarantee her wolf would recover even if the bond were restored. The air left Calder's lungs. Let me see her. She does not want to see you, Orven said. She was quite specific about that. Please. The word came out rougher than he intended, stripped of every layer of authority and command until it was just a man asking for something he did not deserve. Orven looked at Tanith. Tanith looked at the ground. A long silence passed. 5 minutes, Orven said, and if she asks you to leave, you leave. The cottage was small and warm inside, lit by a fire and a handful of candles that threw trembling shadows across the stone walls. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams. A narrow bed had been pushed against the far wall, and in it, buried under a heavy wool blanket, lay Seren. She was thinner than when he had last seen her. Her cheekbones stood out sharply beneath skin that had gone pale and papery. Dark circles bruised the hollows beneath her eyes. Her hair, usually so carefully brushed, lay tangled on the pillow. She looked like someone who had been carrying something impossibly heavy for a very long time and had finally set it down, not because the weight had eased, but because her arms had simply given out. Seren, Calder breathed. Her eyes opened, brown and deep and exhausted. They found him, and for one unguarded second her whole face changed. Relief and longing and pain flooded her expression so fast she could not catch any of it. And then she did what she always did. She tucked it all away, smoothed her features into calm composure, and became invisible again. "Your Majesty," she said. The title hit him harder than any blow he had taken in battle. She used to call him Calder. In the early months when she was still trying, she had used his name with a softness that made it sound like something worth having. Now it was, "Your Majesty," formal, distant, the language of someone who had already left long before her body followed. "You need to go," she said quietly. "I read your letter. Then you know why I left. You left to save my life. I left because staying was killing us both." She closed her eyes. "And because it was clear that me leaving would not hurt you nearly as much as me staying was hurting me." The words landed like a fist. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She had weighed the equation, her suffering against his indifference, and the math had been obvious. "Go home, Calder," she said, and his name in her mouth now sounded like a door closing. "Let Orven do what needs to be done. In a few weeks, you will not feel the bond at all. You can find a new queen, someone better suited, someone who does not need so much from you. Seren, please." "I am not angry with you," she said, and her voice was so gentle it made his eyes burn. "I want you to know that. I was never angry. I was just tired. So very, very tired of reaching for someone who was never there." She turned her face toward the wall. "Your 5 minutes are done, sire," Orven said from behind him. Calder did not move. "Leave," Seren whispered. "Please." He left. He walked out of the cottage and into the cold evening air and kept walking until the trees swallowed him. Then he pressed his back against an oak and slid to the ground, his knees drawn up, his forehead on his arms. And for the first time since he was a child, the Alpha King wept. He did not leave. Orven found him at dawn, sitting exactly where he had collapsed the night before, his back against the oak, his eyes red-rimmed and fixed on the cottage door. "You are still here," she observed. "I am not leaving," Calder said. His voice was raw, scraped hollow by a night spent dismantling every comfortable lie he had ever told himself about his marriage. Orven studied him for a long moment. "She will not change her mind, you know. She has already decided. The severing is planned for tomorrow at sunrise." "Tomorrow?" Calder rose to his feet so fast the healer took a step back. "That is too soon. You said yourself her wolf may not survive it." "Her wolf may not survive either option at this point," Orven said flatly. "The severing at least gives her a chance to live, even diminished. If the bond continues to deteriorate on its own, the collapse will kill you both." "Then give me today," Calder said. "One day. That is all I am asking. It is not my permission you need." "I know." He found Tanith first. The handmaid was heating water over a small fire outside the cottage, her movements precise and practiced. "She will refuse to see you," Tanith said without looking up. "I know," Calder said again. He sat on the bench and placed his hands on his knees. Tanith, I need you to tell me something. The flowers. Tanith's hands stilled. What flowers? There were flowers on my desk every Monday for over a year. White roses, cut fresh, placed in a small blue vase. They stopped appearing 6 months ago. Were those from her? Tanith was quiet for a moment. She picked them herself every Sunday evening from the garden along the southern wall. She would arrange them in the morning before you woke and leave them where you would see them. Calder pressed his hand over his eyes. I never said a word. No, sire, you did not. What else did I miss? Tanith set the kettle down. She did not look at him, but her voice carried the controlled heat of someone who had wanted to say these things for a very long time. She embroidered a handkerchief for your birthday. You left it folded on the dresser without opening it. She learned to play the piece of music your mother used to sing, the one Yossi mentioned you loved as a boy. She practiced for 3 months on a borrowed instrument. You were called to council the night she planned to play it for you, and she never tried again. Each detail was a stone dropped into a well, and the well had no bottom. She rewrote the trade proposal for the northern merchants because she noticed an error in the tariff calculations. She gave the corrected version to Counselor Aldrich and asked him to present it as his own because she did not want to embarrass anyone. She resolved a dispute between the kitchen staff and the head steward that had been festering for 8 months. She treated a servant's child who had a fever in the middle of the night because no one else would come. Tanith turned to face him. She did all of this quietly, without recognition, without thanks, because she believed that being useful was the only way to justify taking up space. And she did it while the bond inside her was tearing itself apart. Calder sat with the weight of it, letting every word settle into the place where his self-image used to be. The portrait he had carried of himself, the capable king, the effective ruler, the man who managed everything, had been a lie of omission. He had managed everything except the person who mattered most. I need to speak with her, he said. She will not. I am not going to ask her to come back, Calder interrupted. I am not going to command her. I am not going to argue or persuade or use the authority she never asked me to have over her. He reached into his coat and removed the ring. It sat in his palm, the pale blue stone catching the morning light. I am going to sit in that room and tell her what I should have told her every single day for 2 years. And if she still wants to go through with the severing after that, I will hold her hand while it happens. Tanith stared at him for a long time. Then something in her expression shifted, not softening exactly, but the hard edge of her distrust thinned just slightly. I will ask her, Tanith said. That is all I can promise. She disappeared inside the cottage. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. Calder stood perfectly still and tried not to think about the fact that everything he had left depended on the answer of a woman he had given every reason to say no. The door opened. She will see you, Tanith said. But she told me to tell you that if you growl at her healer again, she will have Orven put something unpleasant in your tea. Something loosened in Calder's chest. Not quite hope, but the space where hope might fit, if he earned it. He stepped inside. Seren was sitting up in bed, propped against the headboard with pillows at her back. She looked fragile in the candlelight, her collarbones standing out beneath the loose neckline of her shift. But her eyes were clear, and her jaw was set with the quiet stubbornness he was only now learning to recognize as the thing that had held her together all along. You have something to say, she said. So say it. Calder pulled a chair to her bedside and sat. He placed the ring on the blanket between them, not pushing it toward her, not holding it out. Just setting it down. Neutral ground. I am not here to bring you home, he began. Good, she said. Because I am not going. He nodded. I know. I am here because there are things you deserve to hear. And I have been too blind and too proud and too comfortable to say them. She watched him, her expression guarded, her hands folded in her lap. "You put flowers on my desk every Monday," he said. "White roses in a blue vase." Her breath caught. "You learned my mother's song. You corrected the Northern trade proposal. You treated a servant's child when no one else would come." His voice was steady, but his eyes were bright. "You lit a candle on my nightstand every night so I would not come home to the dark. And I never once, not one single time, told you that I saw any of it." Seren's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together and looked away. "I did not see it," Calder said. "And that is the truth I have to live with. Not that you left, Seren, but that you stayed as long as you did. That you kept reaching for me long past the point where any sane person would have stopped. I do not deserve that kind of patience, and I certainly do not deserve to ask for more of it." "Then what are you asking for?" she whispered. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his head bowed. "I am asking for today. Not tomorrow. Not forever. Just today. Let me sit here. Let me be the man who is present. And tomorrow, if you still want Orven to sever the bond, I will not stop you. But let me have today. Let me finally be in the same room as you, and actually see you." Seren stared at him. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent and unwiped. "You are an impossible man, Caldervane," she said, her voice breaking. "I know," he said. She did not say yes, but she did not say no. She closed her eyes, and the tears kept falling, and after a long, trembling moment, she moved her hand across the blanket and placed it over the ring, not picking it up, not putting it on, just covering it with her palm. And Calder stayed. He stayed the entire day. He did not try to convince her, did not argue or plead or deliver grand speeches about duty or destiny or the bond they shared. He simply sat in the chair beside her bed and, for the first time in 2 years, paid attention. She was cautious at first, guarded. She answered his questions in short, careful sentences, the way someone speaks to a person they have stopped trusting with anything that matters. But Calder did not push. He asked small things: how she liked her tea, whether she preferred the garden in morning light or evening light, what book she had been reading before she left. "The one on the nightstand?" Seren asked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "You noticed that?" "Green cover," Calder said. "Gold lettering on the spine. You were halfway through. You kept your place with a dried sprig of lavender." She stared at him. "I noticed more than you think," he said quietly. "I just never told you. I never thought you needed to hear it." "Everyone needs to hear it, Calder." The words landed softly, but they rearranged something inside him. He nodded. "I know that now." The hours passed. He told her about the council meetings she had missed, and she laughed at his impression of Councillor Aldrich arguing with the trade minister. The sound of her laughter was so unexpected, so achingly familiar, that he had to look away for a moment to steady himself. She told him about the journey east, about Tanith singing off-key in the rain to keep their spirits up, about the morning she woke in the forest and a fox had curled up against her back, drawn by the last traces of her wolf's warmth. "It just looked at me," Seren said, her voice soft with wonder, like it was keeping watch. Calder listened. He listened the way he should have listened for 2 years, not with half his mind on the next problem or the next crisis. He listened with his whole self, and he felt something shift in the space between them. Not the bond. Not yet. Something smaller and more fragile. Trust, maybe. The ghost of what it had been before he starved it. When evening came, Orven checked Seren's vitals and declared she needed rest. Calder rose from the chair, and Seren's hand moved involuntarily, a half-reaching gesture she caught and pulled back before it completed. But he saw it. "I will be right outside," he said. "You do not have to stay." "I know." He slept on the bench outside the cottage, his cloak pulled around him against the cold. Tanith brought him a blanket without a word. Yose, who had made camp nearby, came and sat beside him. "Dawn is in 6 hours," the beta said. "I know." "She will go through with it." Calder stared at the cottage door. "Maybe. And if she does? Then I hold her hand while it happens." I promised. Josie was quiet for a long time. "You have changed, sire." "No," Calder said. "I have just stopped hiding from what was already there." He did not sleep. He sat on the bench and watched the stars move overhead and thought about every moment of their marriage. Not the failures this time, the moments between. The night she had fallen asleep reading, and he had taken the book gently from her hands and marked her page. He had pulled the covers over her shoulders. He had stood there watching her breathe, and he had felt something real and tender and terrifying. And he had walked away from it. Because feeling it meant admitting she mattered, and admitting she mattered meant he could lose her. So he had built walls and called them duty, built distance and called it leadership, built silence and called it strength. And she had suffered for every brick he laid. Dawn arrived slowly, bleeding pink and gold across the tree line. Orven emerged from the cottage. "It is time," she said. "She has decided." Calder stood. His body felt heavy, but his mind was clear for the first time in longer than he could remember. He walked inside. Seren was sitting up in bed, dressed in a clean white shift, her hair brushed and braided. She looked like she was preparing for a ceremony, the end of something. "Seren," Calder said, and his voice broke on her name. She looked at him, and her composure cracked just enough to show the devastation beneath it. "Do not make this harder. I have one thing left to say, then I will keep my promise." She pressed her lips together and nodded. Calder knelt beside the bed, not the posture of a king, the posture of a man with nothing left but the truth. "You hum when you think no one is listening," he said. "It is tuneless and wandering, and you do it when you are reading or sorting herbs or walking in the garden early in the morning. I heard it every day. I heard it through walls and across corridors and in the space between waking and sleep. I never told you because I was afraid that if I named it, if I said out loud that the sound of your humming was the only thing in my entire life that made the world feel quiet, then I would have to admit what you are to me. And I was not brave enough." Seren's breath hitched. "You tilt your head to the left when you are thinking hard about something," he continued, his voice raw but steady. "You fold linen with the edges perfectly aligned every single time, like it is a form of prayer. You cry silently, even when you are alone, because you learned early that your pain should not take up space. You smell like rose water and lavender, and for the rest of my life, no matter what happens in this room, those scents will mean you." Tears were streaming down her face now, and she was not hiding them. "I see you," Calder whispered. "I see you, Seren. Not because of the bond, not because losing you taught me what having you meant. I see you because you are the most extraordinary person I have ever known, and I was too much of a coward to stand in the light of that." He placed his hand on the bed, palm up, open, not reaching for her, offering. "You do not owe me anything," he said. "Not forgiveness, not a second chance, not even another minute. But I need you to know, before Orven does what she is going to do, that the bond is not dying because I do not love you. It is dying because I loved you so much it terrified me, and I let my fear rob us both." The room was silent except for the fire and the sound of Seren trying to breathe through her tears. Orven stood by the window, her herbs laid out on the table, her preparations complete. She looked at Seren and waited. Seren looked at the healer. She looked at the herbs, at the careful arrangement of instruments that would cut away the bond and leave her diminished, but alive. Then she looked at Calder's open hand on the bed. "You are a fool, Calder Vane," she whispered through her tears. "An absolute fool." "Yes," he said. She placed her hand in his, and the bond, that fragile, battered, nearly dead thread between them, flared, not with the explosive force of something new, but with the deep, steady warmth of something that had been waiting, patient and stubborn, for someone to finally feed it. Seren gasped, her hand tightened around his, and her eyes went wide. "I can feel it," she breathed. "My wolf. She is still there." Orven set down her instruments and crossed her arms. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes that might have been satisfaction. "Well then," the healer said dryly, "I suppose I will not be needing these today." Calder pressed his forehead against their joined hands, and something between a laugh and a sob tore free from his chest. Seren's other hand came up and settled in his hair, her fingers trembling against his scalp. "Do not ever stop seeing me," she said fiercely, her voice thick with tears. "Do not ever look through me again." "Never," he promised, and for the first time, they both believed it. The bond did not heal overnight. There were hard days, weeks even, where the old patterns tried to reassert themselves. Calder would get pulled into council meetings that ran past dinner, and Seren would feel the familiar tug of anxiety in her chest, the old fear that she was disappearing again. But he came back. Every time, he came back. Sometimes he left the meeting early. Sometimes he sent Yossi to fetch her so she could sit beside him while the ministers argued, her hand resting on his knee beneath the table where no one could see. He noticed things now, small things that he said out loud, because he had learned that seeing someone meant nothing if you never told them. "You changed the flowers in the library," he said one morning over breakfast. Seren looked up from her tea, startled. "I did. Yesterday. Wildflowers this time, not roses." She smiled, and the dimple in her left cheek appeared. "You prefer them?" "I prefer that you put them there," he said. Her wolf came back slowly. Week by week, the strength returned. The senses sharpened. The hollow ache in her chest filled in with something warm and steady. The bond grew stronger not because of any grand gesture, but because of the accumulation of small ones. A hand on her back as they walked the corridor. A question about her day, asked with genuine interest and followed by actual listening. A cup of tea left on her nightstand in the evenings, always the blend from her homeland, always still warm when she found it. The cord adjusted. There were whispers at first, speculation about the Queen's disappearance and sudden return, but Calder silenced them not with authority but with visibility. He walked with her in public. He seated her beside him at every function. He introduced her to visiting dignitaries not as his queen, but by her name. "This is Seren," he would say, and the way he said it made the name sound like something precious. Months passed. The nightstand in their chambers held two items now. A candle that burned through the night, lit by Seren. And beside it, a small blue vase of white roses, placed there by the king every Sunday evening without fail. On a morning in late spring, Calder woke slowly. The light was gold through the curtains, warm and unhurried. He reached across the bed, and his hand found her. Warm skin, steady breathing, the slow rise and fall of someone deeply, peacefully asleep. He shifted closer. She stirred, turning toward him, and her hand found his chest. Her ring caught the light, the pale blue stone flashing once against his skin, warm now because she never took it off. He pressed his lips to her forehead and closed his eyes. The room was full. The bed was warm. And the woman beside him was exactly where she chose to be. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you very soon for the next one.